Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Mindful Journey guest interview. I'm so delighted that you're here with us today. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you've been with us for a number of these conversations, well, welcome back. As always, we'll dive deep into conversation, and I'm so delighted to bring you our guest today, Ben Harrow. Ben and I have not had a chance to meet in person yet, admittedly, but we had a great conversation just a few weeks ago, and I look forward to he and I being able to spend some time in person. He has a remarkable story, but beyond his story, which I'm going to highlight just a few components of it, and we'll talk, about it certainly today. What I really respected and admired about Ben, just in the first conversation, is you can feel his servant's heart, his desire to make people better. He has gone through something that I think it's safe to say many would, when seeing, would look at and say, well, it'd be understandable if he had a victim type mentality. He did just the opposite of such, where he took that and didn't use it as something to define him, but now an opportunity for him to help others define themselves. So Ben joins us today as the president of PAM Jets. He is a retired United States Army Special Forces officer. He is a West Point graduate, and in 2012, just to highlight a piece of his story, he unfortunately stepped on an IED where he lost both legs above the knee, two fingers, I believe, and suffered other traumatic injuries. Being told he'd likely never walk again, Ben refused to be bound by those odds that doctors placed on him. Maybe relatable to some of you listening, what odds have been placed on you by others. I could go on and on about his accolades and different awards that he's received and achieved, but I think what you'll find today from Ben again is a humility, a servant's heart, and a straight in your face type of approach, not in a negative way, but in one that disallows us to take on victimhood that we might want to otherwise take on in our life. So, with all of that being said, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, Adam, thanks so much for having me on. The Listening to you introduce me, it's funny in a way because you talk about not, I definitely don't see myself as a victim, and it'd be easy to kind of have that victim mentality with the situation that I put myself in, by stepping on a bomb and losing legs. But I was actually just rewriting a speech. I'm going out to LA to speak at an event, and um, I just kind of had this clever aha moment of how to intro myself and tailor it. And I was thinking, you know what? I always get up on stage and people always think like, all right, who's this guy? I'm sure he's got some amazing story. Maybe he's trying to sell a book. Maybe he's some sort of like life coach. And I was like, I think it would be important to start off with like what I'm not, right? Like I'm not a guru. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trying to sell a book, and I'm not a life coach because I feel like to be a coach, you have to be retired from this game like called life. And I'm still very much in the thick of it. And I definitely am and not a victim. And that's what I'm not. Like, what am I then? I was a lacrosse player. I was a Green Beret. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm authentic. I've just
Mhm.
someone that's done some amazing things, and I'm just authentic. And at the end of the day, I just feel like I want to be able to kind of pay it forward and help make better human beings. Kind of just like yourself, like bring people together, have meaningful conversation. And if just one person gets something out of like listening to our conversation, then you know what, Adam, high five, we did it. Like that's
Yeah, I
it.
love that, brother. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that you went deep on us right away, Ben, and that's amazing. You talked about what you're not and then kind of what you are, and you shared some titles in there. I think a lot of times people attach to their titles in life, and when something gets ripped away from them, they lose their essence. And as somebody who was such a high performing Green Beret, I mean, that's some of the most elite of the elite, societally speaking, that we look to as folks who have it all together, as folks who know how to lead. Yet in an instant, that was taken away from you. That title was taken away. Then how did you reinvent yourself in a way that you can still show up with conviction and passion and purpose in your life in spite of because I assume the military was so meaningful to you, right? And I trust it
Yeah.
still is. But in a moment, you were no longer allowed to be a war fighter. You were no longer allowed to lead men and women. You didn't have, the physical capacity, right? So how did you what type of work did you do on yourself to ensure that the Ben that we see today wasn't ripped away fully?
Yeah. No, I mean, great question. Tons to peel away with that. First off, waking up in a hospital bed and looking down and not seeing your legs, uh, is probably one of the toughest things I've ever had to go through. Because especially for me, as someone that's been an athlete my entire life, and I still consider myself an athlete, but that's part of that mindset and that mentality. Um, I equate it to like losing your two best friends that you spent every day of your life with, just doing everything with, and they're just not there anymore. And it was really tough for me to cope with that, to deal with that. In the beginning, it was a lot of just kind of crying to my wife and whoever was in the room with me of like, why me? Like, how did this happen to me? Of all the people for this to happen to, I can't believe this happened to me. And I feel like the quicker that I was able to express that emotion and kind of get it off my chest and be done with it, the quicker I was able to think, all right, but like what next? Like it's still me. I'm still Ben. And that's something that Gina told people even in the very, very beginning. I remember hearing that. I don't necessarily remember the conversation I had with her because I was so drugged up, but the first time that I saw Gina after I got injured and they took me off the ambulance and she met me at Walter Reed, and I guess we're in the elevator and we're going up to the ICU just to monitor me before they put me into my hospital room and start going through surgery and surgery and surgery. I turn to her and I go, "Hey, babe." She's like, "Hi, Benny." And I go, "Well, I guess my dreams of being a calf model are shot." And she's like, "You're an idiot." Like she couldn't believe I just said that. And so she told everybody, and like, "Oh my God, how's Ben doing?" And she's like, "You know what? It's actually it's kind of scary. It's still Ben, which is great. It's just Ben without legs. She still saw me. She still, it was still my like sarcastic personality and just who I am." And yeah, I think that my like resilience and like my willpower to continue to uh progress and figure out what success is for me. And that's another conversation we can get into of like, success versus progress and what that really is. But I think that resilience piece and my willpower, it's like a muscle, and everybody has a bicep muscle. Everyone has like a resilience muscle. Some people are born with bigger bicep muscles and resilient muscles, and some people are not. But the more that you work at those muscles and train them, the bigger that they'll grow. And just through the nature of me, my experiences growing up, specifically me being an athlete and realizing at an early age, what it takes to be a successful athlete and how that kind of overlays and overlaps life. If you work at it, if you're willing to put the reps in, if you're really good at the basics, you'll be great at whatever your sport is, at whatever your trade is, at whatever your passion is, whether
Mhm.
that's, lacrosse, whether that's being the best Green Beret that you want to be, whether you want to be a painter. If you can be good at the basics and put the time in and be disciplined to your trade crafts, you'll be great. And for me, getting out, realizing, all right, I need to get out of where my current situation is, which is a position that I don't like, which is I'm stuck in this hospital bed and I can't walk. I need to figure out how to get out of this hospital bed. And I just dedicated myself to that craft of recovery. The first step was I got to get off the drugs. And at the time, I was on two different types of oxy. I was attached to morphine. They were giving me ketamine, just totally doped up. And I just realized I got to get off the drugs. And I made the choice of like, all right, I'm going to stop taking all the drugs. And it was like very soon thereafter me getting injured, like week 3 or 4. Unheard of like somebody taking themselves off drugs after stepping on a bomb like I did. And super painful. I was dealing with a lot of nerve pain, dealing with withdrawal from coming off all the narcotics. But I dealt with it. I sucked it up. I realized that what my goal was, if I needed to get out of the hospital, inpatient and start the procedure of like getting my prosthetics, I got to get out of the hospital, like inpatient scenario, doped up with all these things.
Mhm.
And I did it, and the doctors were like, we've never seen anybody take themselves off drugs so quick. And instead of being inpatient for like 4 to 6 months, which they told my wife originally, I was only inpatient for 2 months. And the
Mhm.
next thing, the next thing was trying to figure out how to walk again. And so much of my right leg got taken off in the blast that I couldn't wear full size prosthetics and was super frustrating. And I remember telling my wife, it's not the magician, it's like the wand. I'm ready to go. I just don't have the equipment. And I ended up figuring out a process and a procedure um, to regrow bone. And I went through this bone lengthening procedure and ended up setting two medical world records, one of which was the most bone regenerated on a human. And I regrew about over 5 inches of femur on myself and
Wow.
got myself up and walking. And I just, you know, and that was a whole nother process of learning how to walk on prosthetics. And it was just being very disciplined and dedicated and, every day knowing what I was going to do to um, get myself where I wanted to be.
Mhm. Man, Ben, thank you for taking us there right away. Obviously, I knew your story would come up, and we dive into it, and I trust we'll continue to throughout this conversation. But I really appreciate just your vulnerability and giving us an inside look into those raw moments right when it happened, and admire the humor you brought to the situation. That you told your wife, "Hey, I guess I can't be a calf model anymore." That really speaks to, as you said, and I love what you mentioned of I'm still Ben. You didn't allow something externally to take away what is internal. And I think it's a powerful message for our listeners, which is why I wanted to narrow in on that when something happens, perceivably to us, we get to choose how it is that we're going to respond to it. My question to you, and there's so many ways that I want to take this, that we could take this from what it is that you shared. When it sounds like you were very intentional on step by step, that I wasn't you weren't going to get to the next moment till you won this moment. How important is that, do you think, for people if they're trying to tackle some grandiose goal? If maybe they're starting a business, maybe they're trying to become the CEO of their company, rising through the ranks, maybe they're wanting to be an athlete, maybe they're needing to relearn to walk. How important is it from your lived experience to break things down incrementally and not get too attached to the end destination?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, that learning, getting at from point of injury to really fully being independent and walking on prosthetics, being able to live my life like I am now, that was probably a 3.5 year process. So it wasn't like every single day I was like, I'm just here I'm a professional amputee, like I'm just going to get paid by the military to learn how to walk again. Yeah, I was doing that and I was still part of the military, but I was also still trying to figure out like, all right, once I get up and walking, like what's on the next hillside, like what's over the next ridge line. And like I said, I'm also a husband and a father. I have to be able to provide for my family, and there's that, personally and professionally. I wanted it to continue to do more than just be, an amputee and live off my pension. Um, so there was tons of other stuff that I was trying to figure out in terms of like professionally and what I was doing, but in terms of like grandiose goals of I need to learn how to walk again, it's like how do you eat an elephant, like one bite at a time, and it's just every day you have to do a little bit of something to get to that. And I think I learned that too, going through the military. To become a Green Beret, the qualification course is 2 years sometimes for some folks, maybe a little less depending on what your language is. And that's and yeah, and and what group you're going to and your skill set. So it's a long journey, right? But like every day you're doing something that checks the box to get you there. I still do that now. I mean, I'm very like task oriented and driven. Even professionally, personally, you mentioned me being president of Pam Jets. I left Pam back in September amicably, and doing some other stuff with some in an
Sorry,
entrepreneurial.
misspeaking
No,
on
no, no,
that.
it's all right. The in like an entrepreneurial like capacity with like some different businesses and some things going on, but lots of different things. Each of those different things have like major goals. And every day I still have like my little leader book where either at night, the night prior or that morning, I write down my little to-do list of these are the things that I'm going to do to get myself, that I know that need to get done, not just like, little errands, but like tasks that have to get done to accomplish, progress, which, like I said, like there's people want to talk about success and progress. And, for me, for me, it's all about the journey. I love the journey
Mm,
because you're going to get to the destination regardless. Don't focus so much on the destination because you're going to miss the journey. Like all the learning happens
love
during the
that.
journey. Like all like the fun stuff. The ups and downs happen at the journey. The finish line will be there regardless.
I love that. I love that. Please, I'd love you to elaborate on that because I think it's powerful. What you're saying, success versus progression. I think a lot of people, and you and I talked about this when we first connected, how with social media now, everyone's chasing something, right? Because everyone's posting their highlight reels, and
Yeah.
you don't often know what it is that people actually have, which is, one of the intentions that drive these conversations to humanize this shared experience of life. But what does success mean to you from your definition? And then would you mind expounding upon like this? Because and I've not heard this before, like the two words combined, success and progression. I kind of like what you were touching on. So personally, what does success mean to you? And then what's the difference between progress and success?
Yeah. So the definition of success to me is once again, it's kind of like how I was like defining myself to you. Success isn't the house, success isn't the job, success isn't the car, success isn't the girl. That is, as my friend would tell you, is all bullshit. That's bullshit. Success is really progress, right? Are you growing? Are you growing as an individual? Are you growing mentally? Are you growing physically? Are you growing spiritually? Are you progressing and becoming a better version of yourself in some way, shape, or form, as a husband, as a professional, as a father, as an athlete, as a Green Beret, right? So that to me is what success is. And nowadays with social media, I feel like it's very easy to get caught up in the shininess of success, and not always the progress that got somebody there, and
Mhm.
uh, it's so funny. I live in South Florida. There's a lot of shininess down in South Florida. I live in I live in a nice neighborhood in South Florida, but there's also a lot of these, Instagram influencers, not so much in my neighborhood, but just down in South Florida. And I saw someone's Lamborghini got repoed in my neighborhood this week, and I was like, "There you go. That's another prime example of the people following the shininess."
That's so funny. That is you're right. As I mentioned, I'm in South Florida as well, and there is so much of that materialism and I think this type of conversation, not to pat us on the back, I think is important for people to hear that a lot of times those things, even if they are real, they're not going to bring about a fulfillment, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure you've seen plenty of people in your life who seemingly have it all from whatever success means to them. But and somebody shared with me the quote before that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure, which has always resonated with me. To measure your progress, Ben, is there anything that you're doing? I love your example, by the way. That was awesome stuff. And having a book, it seems like you're very intentional on either the day before or morning of to hold you accountable. But do you do anything in particular where maybe quarterly or yearly or maybe even daily where you're asking questions or doing some sort of checklist to see how am I showing up as a father? How am I showing up as a husband? How am I showing up as an entrepreneur? Is there anything? If not, that's okay. I'm just curious. I'm guessing you've probably got some sort of system that helps you. But just out of pure curiosity.
yeah. I mean, there's two things. One thing that I do that's formal, but not in such like a formal like setting up, sitting down and like journaling about it. But every day I try to take it every day. Like 10, 15 minutes of kind of like, call it meditation, prayer, self-reflecting, but it's like a breath work also. Like I'm very big into Wim Hof breathing.
Hmm.
And so I usually do that in the morning or sometime during the day and end up by just, you're with your thoughts and kind of thinking everything that's going on. Something that I've been trying to do more of that's more formal, and I got the idea from a friend of mine that told me that he did it, which I was like, oh, I love that idea. I want to start doing that. Is he said every Friday at the end of the week, he pours himself a glass of wine and he just sits down and he kind of writes of like, all right, what went well, like kind of like in the military, you call it an AAR, an after action review. And he basically does like a more of a formal, informal AAR with his glass of wine and his pen and paper. And he just writes down, all right, this was good this week. This was bad this week. What am I going to do to improve, what was bad for next week? What am I going to do to kind of like sustain of like what went well this week?
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, oh, I like that. Have I been very good at it? No, because I've been so busy with everything else. But I thought it was a very clever thing to try and implement.
Yeah, intentional reflection. I really
Yeah.
like that. That's awesome. Going back to your early years in the military, what is it that drove you into wanting to get into the military, and then particularly becoming one of the elite, if you will, in pursuit of the Green Beret? Because there's additional, obviously, training from my vantage point. I don't know, I've never served in the military, but have a deep respect for what it is that you all do, and have a little familiarity from friends and such. But just curious, for if you can share with the listeners what was the drive, the why behind getting you into, first of all, just enlisting, and then secondly, the more niche pursuit to become a special forces officer.
Yeah. So how I found myself in the military was really through lacrosse. I knew I wanted to play college lacrosse. I knew I wanted to play Division I lacrosse. And it just worked out that the probably the two best programs that were the most serious about me at the D1 level was the Naval Academy and West Point. And then also, I remember filling out college applications when I was in high school, and it's always asking, "What do you want to be?" Kind of what do you want to be when you grow up, and what do you want to major in? And I was like, I'm still in high school, and like, I don't really know. Like, I want to major in history. I think I don't know business. I have no idea. I just knew that I wanted to play lacrosse in college and try and win a national championship and go down that path. And because of that, I also knew that going to the academies, when you graduate, you already have a job because you have to do 5 years of service to repay back your commitment. And then also knowing that there's, a good network to help you figure out what after the military you want to do within the academies. So that was, how I ended up going down the path of going to West Point. Um, I love being at the military academy. I enjoyed being a cadet. Playing a varsity sport at the military academies. It's kind of like you're in a fraternity. You eat your meals with your friend. Everyone's your best friend on the team. You're taking your meals with the team. You're always hanging out with the team on the weekends. So it was like being in a fraternity almost. And then once I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the infantry at first. Um, I went to Iraq. I graduated West Point in 2005, was in Iraq from '06 to '07, and was there for 15 months straight during the surge. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to work with three separate special forces teams, all from different SF groups. So I got to experience not only just the SF mission and what they do, but also kind of like the flavor and the vibe of each group because each group's kind of different. And I just thought, I kind of knew about special forces and special operations before, obviously being in the academy and going through Ranger School and meeting guys that were Green Berets in Ranger School and meeting guys from Ranger Regiment. But I didn't necessarily, I knew that they were special. I just didn't know what made them so special. But working with them, I realized that quickly that the SF guys and the Green Berets, which is special forces, the it's more of like a chess game. And I use this analogy all the time where, Rangers and SEALs are like checkers masters, and they're the best at what they do in their little like space. and Green Berets are more like chess masters. And that's not like a put down to say one game is better than the other. It's just that it's kind of two separate games, but there's some similarities. But in chess, there's definitely some moves that you do that these guys don't. And
Mm,
as SF guys, you work a lot closer with the State Department, three-letter agencies, really working closely with an indigenous partner force and having to have more cultural understanding, like language training, cultural training of the problem set that you're giving. And it's a lot more of an ambiguous problem set that the SF teams are given than so much of a more of a clear cut defined mission that the SEALs and Rangers have of strike this target, remove this person from the battlefield, seize this terrain. For us, it's more of a very gray, in country X, go conduct unconventional warfare. Okay,
mm.
what does that mean exactly? Like what am I allowed to do? It's just more of like, do this, don't get caught. All right, we'll figure it out. So that's how I ended up going down the military route and putting my packet in for selection, SFAS, Special Forces Assessment and Selection. I did that when I got back from Iraq, and that was when I went through. It got shortened to 14 days. They're always changing. Selection is always kind of developing and changing. One to get the best people that they want there it's the standards are not the standards, but the problem sets are always going to change a little bit. And they're also always changing it so that way you can never game the system. Like if you went through selection the month before I went, we'll do the same events, but they're going to be in a different order. Right. So that
Mm,
way I can't be like, oh, you told me on day 3, we're going to do this obstacle course. So I'm going to know we're going to do that. So they play mind games with you
mhm.
because they're not looking just for like a physical stud. They're looking for, mental ninjas as well that can deal with tough situations mentally
Yes.
in, high stress environments. So like when I went through, it was 2 weeks. Not only was it at 2 weeks, but we did reverse cycle. So they actually made us sleep during the day, but you do everything at night
Mm.
just to, as an extra curveball.
Yeah, something to challenge the mind to see if you're willing
Yeah.
to withstand. I am curious what I don't know if there's data out there that exists, but what is the dropout rate, if you will? I might not be using the right terminology, but
Yeah. Like the attrition rate. I think
yeah.
they're all kind of similar. I don't know which special operations selection course has like the highest attrition rate.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's somewhere around like from start to finish, the attrition rate is like 83% or 80%, something along those. So like I bet you in my selection class, just selection in itself, because you have to get selected to even start the qualification course, which is like I said, that 2-year pipeline.
Mhm.
There was probably like 300 candidates that started. I bet you they only selected, and I'm trying to think, in that conference room at the very end of it, like still standing, we had maybe 50 kids that got
Mhm.
selected. And then
Mhm.
those 50 start the qualification course. And during the qualification course, there's still gates that you still have to pass and portions of it that you still have to pass. That some of them is like physical, some of it is like military, like testing.
Mhm.
Some of it is like language, like kids, if you don't pass whatever your language is, you're no good as a Green Beret because you can't communicate, downrange.
Yeah.
So there's still gates that you have to pass.
Interesting. And then from your vantage point, from friends of yours that you got to know and yourself having successfully navigated it and gotten through it, what do you think some of the key characteristics are that allow people to make it versus those who don't?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's not one thing. Obviously, the more physically prepared you are, common sense, to be able to run, to be able to rock, to be able to carry heavy weights, the more physically prepared you are, the better you'll be. But also the mental aspect of it, and I think it also is part of the reason why I was so good, I guess, dealing with my injuries and right is they're looking for somebody that is given minimal information, um, good thinking, outside the box. For us, the box doesn't even exist. It's just, we'll figure out a way to get it done. Um, but you're cold, you're wet, you're hungry, you're tired. It's nighttime. It's the woods are scary, but you're still going to move, from point A to point B, and people can rely on you and trust on you. The other big thing too, lastly, I'd say is besides mentally strong, physically and mentally, is that you're a good teammate, because that's a big
Love
piece
that.
of selection. Is It's called Team Week, and it's something where they're specifically evaluating how you are as a teammate during these stressful events and evaluations that they're putting you through.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. And I'm curious because I wanted to talk to you a lot about leadership today. I think our world can learn so much from military leaders because you're in the most high pressure of situations, right? When life is literally on the line based on, your decisions in that stressful, experience. Um, for listeners today who might be in a defined leadership role, say in a traditional corporate America setting, what what from your vantage point, what do you think are the key indicators? I know there's a variance, right, between being making a decision where people's lives are at risk versus sitting in an office and maybe that decision carries weight but not with the same significance. So I know, again, know there's a variance, but from your vantage point, Ben, being around so many great leaders and being one yourself, what do you think are the key characteristics that people must possess to ensure that their team is going to want to work for them, with them, and rally around their actual mission, their vision, and what it is that they're setting out to do in the world?
Yeah. Um, so great question, and great kind of footnote, because there's been many times where I've been asked to speak at an event, and it's so tough for me they're like, you led in combat and you're a Green Beret. Like, so now how does my insurance team go sell insurance? Like it doesn't like really equate. But there are key attributes that I think if you walk into any sort of organization, whether it's a hospital, a sports team, uh, teachers, you can see and you could start to pick up when you've been around good leadership who the good leaders are. And for me, something that I always talk about is number one is being an intentional leader. Everything that you do, you're intentional about. You're present. If you have to have one-on-ones with a workers or colleagues, you're there in the moment, right? You're not distracted, because that's sort of that rapport building and the human nature piece that you learn as being a good Green Beret when you're trying to establish relationships with members of another country. You're there drinking tea with them. You're not there fucking around on your phone or doing whatever else, right? Like, you're there engaged. And then
Mm,
also part about being an intentional leader is, you're also part of the team. It's not just, hey, need this done, get it done. It's, hey, need this done. I did this piece. Can you do that part? Or I need this done. What can I do to help support you to get this done? Do you have everything that you need? Right. So I think it's
mhm.
just about being a intentional leader.
Hmm. Yeah, that buy-in, that what you're saying resonates with me. Like getting that buy-in from them by showing that you're willing to put your boots on the ground and do the work too. I've seen certainly a number of really great leaders throughout my life and career, and some ineffective ones. And sometimes those who are leading with this ego-centric approach that it's all about me, but you're going to do all the work. There's no culture that's in existence, or if there is, it's one rooted in toxicity. And so I like how you framed that, of being an intentional leader. And then it's funny you brought up the cultural piece of how if you're in a different country, you're drinking tea with them and not on your phone, not disengaged. How difficult was that for you when you were entering into different countries, knowing that there were enemies there, right? People who were trying to do harm to you, to our country, to others. but still having to separate that emotion to connect with them. And maybe to ask this in a better way for our listeners to broaden this, like what are the non-negotiables of meaningful connection?
Um, so there's, I guess, a couple parts of that question.
Yeah,
The first thing that comes to mind is it was definitely eye-opening, you know, day week one, day one of being in Iraq as a second lieutenant infantry platoon leader in Iraq, right? This is it. Like I'm in country, like holy, oh my God. Um, and you start to realize, and I think one of the best lessons I learned in that first week was from my interpreter, who is a Sudanese guy that long interesting story. He's from Sudan. Went studied in England as a engineer. Got his engineering degree in the when Saddam first came into power in the Arabic world. They were looking for Arabic speakers that were engineers to help build up Iraq. Moved to Iraq. The Iraqis took his passport. Never could never leave Iraq again. The invasion happens. He basically walks up to a bunch of American soldiers and he's like, "Hey, I speak English. I could help you guys out." So he had been there for a long time, and not Iraqi too. And obviously, dark African black guy doesn't look like he's Iraqi. So the Iraqis knew that he wasn't Iraqi. So it was an interesting dynamic for him. And he pulled me aside in the very beginning and he said, "Listen, sir, I work for you. I'm not trying to step out of place here. You're in charge and you're the boss. But I'm going to give you this one little piece of advice. When I know you want to do the right thing here, I know that you guys have big hearts. I know the Americans have big hearts. I know that you're trying to establish security. You're trying to do the right thing. You want to bring democracy. But I've been here for so long and I could tell you firsthand, I hear what these people say when you walk in. And when you come into a meeting and you talk about wanting to build a road and build a well and build a school, and they see that as weakness. And you have to understand that this culture that you're in now, they view strength as power. And that's why Saddam was in power, because he would walk around not with a machine gun or threatening people. He walked around with a pistol because they knew that he would execute people at any time. And they respect that. And you have to understand that you need to be able to walk into a room and give them a fist and not so much of an open hand. And that totally changed like my dynamic, because I was there for the same reason, post 9/11, I want to protect America. That was my mindset. And then realizing like, all right, I need to kind of shift my paradigm. And not only that, of like how to approach people or how to talk people, but the American ruler of success is like that. A lot of places in the world, especially the Middle East, and Afghanistan, the ruler for success looks like that. So as a leader on the ground, you have to be able to translate and understand that, people want this at a very strategic level, but on the ground, it's going to look like that. And you need to be able to explain why it looks like that and how it's still a success and how this actually fits that.
mm,
And that was a real big kind of eye opener and paradigm shift for me of, you know, I'm gonna go to Iraq and I'm gonna, beat Al Qaeda. And, you get there and you realize, well, it's not just Al Qaeda you're fighting, you're also fighting the Iranian militias, and then the Iraqis are fighting each other. And it's just a giant cluster F
mm,
of like all these different, it's not as clean cut as maybe you thought it was. And same with Afghanistan. But luckily, my experiences in Afghanistan, I luckily my experiences in Iraq was dealing with a lot of different tribes, different segments of Islam, different like regional players between Al Qaeda, Jaish al Mahdi, the Iranian militias, other foreign partner forces. And it was very kinetic. So I had a lot of trigger pulling time. So getting to Afghanistan, I felt like I was well prepared with my experiences in the conventional army, with what I did in Iraq as a platoon leader on the ground when it came to trying to do stuff in Afghanistan,
mm-hmm,
where it was even more ambiguous, even more.
mm-hmm,
Listen, you're what's supposed to be a 12-man team, but you only have 7 guys. You're going to be the only seven white guys in a 100-mile radius in the middle of Afghanistan. So you need to be able to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. How did those lessons shape you post-military, beyond the injury? Or there's still some things that as you take a moment to pause and reflect that you realize that maybe you're a little bit more intentional as a human being, as a leader, as a father, as a husband because of some of that? Is there anything that you can point to that says, yeah, because of that experience, I'm now wired a little bit differently?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Going through uh going through like my life experience of not just combat, but I think more so especially being a Green Beret and understanding that it's not just the geographic terrain that you're worried about, but also being able to map and understand the human terrain, right? Personalities, people, culture, what motivates people, how to motivate people, how to make people do things that you want to see get done, how you want to
Mhm.
how to understand why people do things, in regards of like, why does the enemy do this? All right, well, I can still take that same idea and apply it to the business world of why do other companies do this? Being able to spot these patterns and then apply it to a plan and putting that into effect and implementing that. I mean, I think that being a Green Beret was like the graduate school, level of how to do business, really.
Mhm.
Business school is great. I'm sure getting your MBA is great. I think a lot of people learn more about how to network and getting their MBA, and not so much of like learning what business is.
So
But
true.
uh, but yeah, I think that was one of the biggest takeaways of my time in the military is just being able to map the human terrain.
Yes, yes. Take us back to that moment in Walter Reed that you started this conversation with, Ben, where as you mentioned, you had tears and, wondering why me? Why me? How did you get through that kind of, because that question in itself, right, has kind of like a victim underlining, if you will. And the reason I ask, what's forthcoming is because I think a lot of times when things happen to people, when they go through a divorce, they maybe face bankruptcy, they get diagnosed with an illness, it's almost natural to want to look internally and say, why me? Why is this happening to me? From somebody who has had that experience and gotten on the other side of it, what do you recall in those moments that allowed you? I know you shared with us already. You went from getting off the drugs to doing this to doing that, but is there something in particular that you remember a shift occurring and happening where you were no longer willing to shed tears for self and really embrace this new identity?
Um, I think it was kind of just going back to what I was saying. I felt I didn't like feeling like I was stuck, and I knew I had to fix this. But I knew, and maybe what like, was the aha moment was that it's on me to fix this, and it's how I like view this, right? Like I can sit here and continue to cry in the hospital bed, or I can jump on my iPad, which I did, and started to look up, bilateral above the knee amputees on YouTube and see other guys walking and people mono skiing and there's people running. Like, all right, this is kind of the path out of here. I don't know exactly what it looks like. It's almost like a path through the jungle. I'm gonna have to hack my way through here to figure out where the path is, but there's a way out, and uh, that was what I was kind of focused on is like, all right, I know that there's a way out. It's not like I'm just surrounded by other people sitting in their hospital beds crying. I see people walking around on prosthetics, living their best lives. I can do that. Like there's other,
Mm,
like anything in life, you see other people doing things and you're like, well, that's an example. I know I can do that. And
yes,
not to, I think it's dangerous, I think it's dangerous to kind of measure yourself against people, but at least you have an idea of like what could be.
it's possible.
And that was like it, and then all right, that's the way out. These are my goals to cut, these are the steps I need to take to get there. Like, all right, like why wait? Like, let's go. Like, let's start this process. Let's go.
Yeah. No, that's actually powerful advice, and I wrote it down so I don't forget. I think comparison, as the old adage goes, can be the thief of joy. But when
Yeah.
you're seeing others and hearing their story, it almost gives us permission to know what is possible. So I think it's a valuable piece of wisdom for sure. And cool to hear from you that it helped you. How about any resentment that came up? What was there? Were you pissed at the military? Were you pissed at Afghanis? Were you pissed at the enemy? And if so, what did you do? I ask this very intentionally too, because I think it's another thing in our world where people are constantly, I hear all the time from people that they don't talk to folks for 20 years because something that they may have been wronged by. And it's not lost on me that there are some things that can perceivably be unforgivable, but so many times it brings toxicity to us when we're in a resentful state. I'm just curious if you had any resentment in that moment, and if so, or at any point in your life, to be honest, and what you've done to free yourself of that.
Honestly, no. And I think I was probably so head down and driven and focused on getting out of the hospital bed and learning how to walk that, yeah, at times when I would probably be like, man, this sucks. I wish I was, I was so focused on getting up and trying to learn how to walk again. And there were times where I was like, all right, this is great. This is tough. This is great. This is tough. It wasn't just a true, like a straight success story. But I never really looked back and was like, I hate the army or I should never have joined the army. Sometimes I even think like maybe, maybe God, look, God has a plan for all of us, and not to, get too religious or try and convert anybody, but maybe it was supposed to be me that stepped on that because no one else on my team could have dealt with it the way that I did.
Mm.
And, do I wish I went the other way and didn't step on the bomb? Absolutely. No one, I don't think anyone would believe me if I said that this has been the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. But, I just feel like you can really get yourself down a weird, like mental booby trap of sitting there and just thinking like this sucks, this should never have happened to me, you know, damn Afghanis. And even when Afghanistan fell, a lot of people reached out to me and were like, "Oh my God, how are you doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's crazy, like I'm watching the news and it was going to happen eventually. We're going to pull out of there. I didn't want to see it to go down like this." And I have friends that were in Afghanistan that I helped get out with some of the operational stuff. But once again, going back to like the ruler piece of like what is, oops, sorry, going back to like the ruler piece of what success looks like. For me, I knew that I was able to accomplish this. I wasn't focused on this. For me, the little valley that we were in, like we were successful. Like we eliminated the Taliban. We built roads. We reestablished villages. Like villagers like moved back, and like the Afghan way of life may not be perfect, and they still live like it was 1,000 years ago, but we accomplished what we set out to do. So I slept fine. I really wasn't stressing it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's amazing. Amazing type of thinking, and it's powerful, and it takes courage. And I hope our listeners didn't miss it. I just want to reiterate it. Realizing that maybe this was meant for me is such a selfless statement because others might not have been able to handle it. And yeah, I think if we can adopt that type of selflessness, we'd all be better off, right? And it doesn't, and I love it. You also package it, Ben, with a non-cliche of, look, I'd much rather have my legs, right? I'd much
Yeah.
rather not have stepped on the bomb. But this is what it is. So with your children and your wife at that moment, um, how did you help them through it? Because I'm sure that, you're like, and forgive me, I can't remember, were your kids already born then? Or
My son was like 1 years old. And
okay.
then we had my daughter later on.
How have you been able to navigate with them? I'm sure at this point you're just dad, but early on when they're maybe in school and other kids are saying, "Oh, your dad, he has got prosthetics or whatever." how did you make them comfortable with your situation? Because it sounds like you got to a place of, hey, I'm still Ben, but that's not always easy for people around us. You hear a lot of times caregivers, not that your family is a caregiver by any
Yeah.
means, but caregivers often take on the brunt of the illness if somebody is on hospice or dying of cancer, et cetera, that it can really be an emotional toll for others. Is there anything that you like did with your kids or your wife to ensure that they felt comfortable to come to you with any emotions they had based upon what they were seeing you go through?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I never wanted the kids to feel like they're missing out or anything, or, obviously it's going to be a little harder. It's going to be a little tougher. It's going to take a little more time, with whatever we're doing or moving or going anywhere. But like, we still made sure that like we went to Disney, or like we still like have taken vacations together. Um, but I think the biggest thing, that my wife and I have always been as like an example of, like, we're never going to let it like stop us. Like, you, you can point at other people that look like they have everything, right? Going back to like the success versus progress type thing, or you look at people and they got everything, but they, you know, they may have other issues, like everyone's got like stuff going on, but this is obviously a lot more visible. This is probably, more heavier than other issues, but we just wanted to make sure that it never stopped us. I mean, if anything, it definitely set us back, right? Definitely slowed us down, but you know, my we just wanted to make sure our kids had like the most normal, if not successful lives like possible. And same with us. Our daughter does dance and she's a kick-ass dancer and she's like winning awards every weekend. And my son's plays soccer and he's trying to play professionally in Europe and chasing that dream. And he's only 14 and he's just as dedicated to soccer as I was as at lacrosse growing up. So I know that he's on the path for something special. But yeah, it was just never wanted it to be a thing, and just trying to be that example to the kids.
That's awesome. Well, I'd like to, and I want to be mindful of our time. I think I promised you 1 hour, so we can perhaps close with this. But you've given us so much inspiration today, so much wisdom, so much value. Deeply grateful, Ben, for just use the word, I think, authentic at the very beginning. And you were all of that in this moment. So gracious to you. But it's not lost on me that in spite of that, there still may be people, who are listening and they're inspired by your story, but maybe they're still going through something in this moment and they don't know how to get out of it, right? They're in a hopeless state. I don't know what that thing may be for them, be it a divorce, be it a bankruptcy, be it a diagnosis. Somebody listening right now who feels like they're in a hopeless state, what is your message to that person?
Whew. I mean, way to end on a light note, huh?
Well, no, we'll go one more question, brother. We'll go one
All
more
right.
after this.
The I mean, I guess my advice to them is that, it really isn't the end of the world. Like, it may feel like it's the end of the world, but that you have to be able to realize that it's just a small piece of something bigger. You will get through it. Just put your head down and endure and keep walking forward. That's what I did. And
Yeah.
losing my legs and trying to figure out how to walk again, rebuild my life. It's just, day by day, you'll walk out of it eventually.
Yes, yeah, good stuff. Well, on a light note, give us something fun about your world, maybe a fun fact, a habit that you've engaged in that's maybe helped you in your personal life, but I don't know, something that we might be surprised to know about Ben, because people might look to you and be like, wow, he's an inspiring guy, well-built guy, gone through all this adversity, but what's a what's something that
And
we'd be
and
surprised to know in
an
your world?
odd, yeah, an odd and unusual fact about me. I've become a big consumer and user of yerba mate, which is the South American like tea that you drink.
Okay.
So I walk around with a little mate cup now, as as a gringo and not someone from Argentina, people always ask me like, "Oh, have you been to Argentina? Are you Argentinian? Like, what's with the mate?" So I guess that's something kind of unique that and
It,
funny.
yeah, I love that. What is I'm curious now because I like trying different. I'm a big coffee drinker, but I this
It will
sounds like
change it.
some
It will change your world completely.
what tell me more, please. I do want to write it down. So what
So
is it? Where can I
yerba,
get it? What is it?
so YERBA
Okay.
mate, MATE, and it's basically like it's like a tea, and it's a
Okay.
super caffeinated tea, and it's its own. It's kind of like the tea. It's kind of like the tea plant or tree, but it's a completely different species, and they grow it down and use it really only in Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina. And basically, what you do is you pour it into this little. I usually have one on my desk, but you pour it into this mug, and it looks like it's got this straw. And you have your thermos, and you just re-pour and re-pour the hot water, and you suck it out of this straw. And at the end of the straw is this little filter. Um, but yeah, you'll easily switch off coffee. I like to drink it really from like after lunch onwards, because if I drink
Yeah.
coffee, after in the afternoon, I get all kind of jittery and I crash. But it will keep you awake and kind of keep you going without like the hard crash later on. And
Interesting.
yeah, it's good. And there's a bunch of other like medical and scientific benefits from it that I don't have off the top of my head, but Google it. You'll love it.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm intrigued to hear that it is heavily caffeinated yet doesn't cause you to crash. Plus, it doesn't keep you up either. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. I guess the tea. So if you drink it at 6 p.m., you're going to be able to sleep by 9 p.m.
I mean, it really just depends on how much you take.
Okay.
It can and will keep you up.
Okay.
But I'm pretty good with the caffeine, so it doesn't
Okay.
really affect me that too much.
Awesome. Ben, you have been awesome, man. Beyond leadership principles and helping us, identify coping mechanisms to get through adversity. You've even given tea recommendations. So, super grateful for you. I can't wait. I'll send you a note offline, and like I mentioned, would love to have lunch with you and continue this dialogue and see how we can continue to partner and collaborate. Because I think that you've got all the ingredients from a story perspective, but from a heart perspective to make a meaningful difference in the world, which you're already doing. So thank you very, very much. Again, I'll send you this recording and follow up with you. Hope your speech goes well in LA. And I hope you use the intro that you mentioned to us that I'm Ben. Here's
Yeah.
what I'm not. Here's who I am. I'm Ben.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on, man. It's great. And love to get together soon.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. Have a great day. Thank you, Ben.
All right, Adam.
See you. Take care.